What's going on, guys? Coverkillernation here, and I just have one thing to say, and that's this. I would cut off my dick and both of my legs to wonder what the fuck Metallica and Lou Reed were thinking. Alright, you can tell what I'm going to be talking about with this video. Not to mention, you probably read the top, the description, the title, whatever the hell you want to call it. We're talking about Lulu. We're talking about Metallica and Lou Reed coming together. An idea that was sounded on paper, or looked on paper and sounded in your mind to be awesome, but ended up becoming one of the biggest goddamn calamities that I've heard this side of Lud Divinium Insanus by Morbid Angel. This may actually top that album. In fact, I'm going to go out there on a limb and say it does. So I'm getting that out of the way. You already know how I feel about this record. But now the fun part, the reason why you should stick around, the why. Why you're going to understand this. Metallica and Lou Reed decided to sculpt a double album. That's right. It ain't just one disc, ladies and gentlemen. It's a twofer. It's a twofer, a double spot, a dual disc. All crafted around the works of a German playwright and his character Lulu, which appeared in 2 plays. So it's only fair, I suppose, that there's 2 discs involved for this to focus on the events from each. Now, the one thing I will say in the defense of this album, and in defense of things that I myself may consider to be downsides, these plays were extremely provocative. These were extremely explicit. They were sexually explicit. These were plays that were really going against the norm of what playwrights and the stage show and the like were really meant to be at the turn of the 1900s. So this was kind of a really big shock to the system whenever these plays came out. So whenever you are going into the studio and you're going to be performing an album based around that, I guess you have to think to yourself, how can we shock the system a little bit? We have to do something that almost feels equal in magnitude, if not greater, considering times have certainly changed, and it takes a whole hell of a lot more to shock civilized society here in 2011. So, with that in mind, Metallica and Lou Reed actually had a rather daunting task in front of them. But the very first line of the very first song should absolutely alienate you from the idea of shocking from the system, and just put the idea in your mind that something fucked just happened whenever that studio light went on and they decided to start recording. I would cut off my legs and my tits. That's part of the first line of the goddamn song. Like a semenless like a woman. The fuck. And of course there's the legendary, the all-encompassing master of what the fucks, I am the table. These lines are absolutely everywhere. Lou Reed is a poet. Don't get me wrong. Lou Reed is certainly a poet. He's got a real knack with words, but god damn if he didn't just have diarrhea of the pen on this goddamn album. It's just awful in some locations. It's just awful in some locations. There's constant repetition, and I understand you gotta drive the point home. I understand you got to do a couple things a little bit differently considering you're reflecting this all based around the 2 plays, blah blah yada fa. But this honestly becomes one of the most tedious and boring albums that I've ever heard in my entire life at some points. And at some points it's also just comedic gold. There's comedic gold in this just because it's that awful, because the lyrics are just, it's not a shock to the system anymore. It just almost strikes you as just mundane, childish toilet shit. This might be a real shock to the system had this been recorded, say, in the 1970s, whenever Lou Reed was starting to experience some minor success with his solo career, as well as, of course, building off of his success with the Velvet Underground. This might have been provocative in the 1980s, the early side, whenever New Wave was really getting on its legs, alternative rock was getting its feet, and this was right as glam rock was getting started off. So, right around there, that whole entire shock of the system could all collectively hit at the same time. But nobody, no generation, is going to adore this album. There's not a market for this record, with the possible exception of those who are so into minimalist, ambient, artistic, endeavorish retardation that somehow they listened to this and they found something absolutely spellbinding about it. First off, Lou Reed's vocals are spattered over the music of Metallica, or whatever music happens to be playing, because there are some points where there's nothing reminiscent to anything Metallica, so you know that they're not involved. It's something very orchestral. So, first off, the mix is definitely off, and I think this was done because it's the only way Lou Reed could be heard. But it's cranked up a little too high. It's very noticeable. It's very irritating. It gets into your brain and just doesn't shut the fuck up. Secondly, this is an album that falls victim to one problem, but it happens in two ways. I know I just blew your mind, baby, but I'm going to tell you what I mean. There are some parts of this album, this 2-CD set, where the music does not reflect Lou Reed's vocals. Where Lou Reed is singing in his droll monotone voice, and Metallica is in the background playing thrash metal, or thrashy style riffs. Then, there are moments where it's the exact opposite. Where Lou Reed and the music kind of flip-flop. Where Lou Reed's vocals are fantastic, but the music makes absolutely no goddamn sense whatsoever. There are moments where Lou Reed actually can shine a little bit, and I don't know what's going on over here. It's either one or the other. It's so damn inconsistent. You're not sure which one it's going to be. Whether it's going to be Lou Reed's vocals being the focal point and the good point, or if it's going to be Metallica. I'm going to say this too. A lot of people are going to say Metallica just fucked themselves with this album. I don't think so. I don't think so at all. I think Metallica is the best part of this album. I know. This is the same guy that bashed Saint Anger. This is the same guy that gave average marks to Death Magnetic, which many people praise. I think Metallica actually gave this album a little bit of something because the riffs that they were able to come up with are very enjoyable. The riffs that they're able to develop are very enjoyable. There's just one little problem. There's just one little problem. Abstract minimalism has one problem that doesn't suit Metallica. It doesn't suit the way in which their music is supposed to really mold itself and develop and form. And that's the fact that the same idea is repeated over and over and over again, each and every song. There is very, very little in the way of actual musical development on this album. In fact, I would say the idea of musical development is almost completely and utterly fucking extinct. Lou Reed is the focal point on this album. His poetry, his storytelling about Lulu, about these two plays, about all the things that would happen, how she was just an exotic dancer that became a prostitute, that became a whore, that had encounters with Jack the Ripper, that had something about Junior Dad, about a dog, about this metaphor and fucking nonsense, that Metallica has left no room for musical evolution whatsoever. They're just back there playing the same riff, the same little idea. They maybe add a little bit of dynamic with the guitar by going from electric to acoustic, or a softer electric to a more, a reverb effect out of that, or a chorus effect, whatever it might be. But whenever it comes to core ideas, none. Gone. The View is one of the best songs on this album. Iced Honey easily could be a single that I would enjoy. But as far as that's concerned, bar none, that is the only song on this album I consider to be halfway tolerable, and Lou Reed almost fucking ruins it. Lou Reed's voice, I don't know what the problem is on this album, but with his solo work and with Velvet Underground, I love it. With this piece of atrocious nonsense, no. It's almost like drunken babbling, as I said on The View. It's almost like he wrote this massive, long, epic poem about these two plays and just decided to go into the studio, right into the recording booth, right in front of the microphone, and just... and just decided to talk about semen. And tits. And how a man should just be fucked over. How a woman is just an object. Basically all the elements of the play. I know I'm complaining a lot, and I know this video is getting long, so I'm just going to cut right to the goddamn chase. This album is a pile of atrocious nonsense. This is 89 plus minutes of my life that I can't get back. But here's the positive. There's a positive. the 89 minutes of listening to this album are behind me. Because those are 89 minutes I will not be spending on this album ever the fuck again. Done. Bye-bye. 2011 just got Saint Anger number 3. Enjoy it, bitches. This year, honestly, has sucked whenever it comes to big name releases. Morbid Angel, Queensryche, Metallica and Lou Reed. Strike 1, strike 2, strike 3. I'm out. Fuck, I want to kill myself.